I simply wanted to first convey my personal feelings about the clean development mechanism, which has been mentioned many times over. To be honest, I am not comfortable with the CDM because the clean development mechanism actually tolerates the polluters. The CDM, while it affords the developing nations with the opportunity to earn and to fund their projects, which otherwise they could not, it actually allows the developed nations not to meet their targets, and we actually tolerate them in doing so. But that's the way it was done, and I hope that Copenhagen in December could actually come up with something better than the CDM, could come up with a clean development fund, period, without an exchange that if you do this for the poor country, then you're forgiven for polluting more or not meeting your target. That's my personal feeling about it. It may not be practicable, but that's my sentiment. But second, you were asking about how... Trust and governance, yes. I think this whole thing redounds to the theme of this Global Humanitarian Forum, which is climate justice. We must all bring our voices together, whether we come from the private sector or government, or whether we're heads of state, leaders in our own right, that climate justice must be rendered. We must urge our populations, our leaders, our lawmakers to be able to provide the funds, enact the policies, and create the programs, and implement it in our own communities, in our own nations, in our own regions, and in the world. And I think that the theme of this conference, which I think will be launched in Cannes on Friday with the advertisers of the world, is really so timely, because it will generate awareness for the need for more assistance to least developed countries. It will create that urge to actually make the developed nations more responsible for what they've done to the world. And the vulnerable countries, without doing anything, will actually be extinguished from the face of the earth. So climate justice is a theme that is most apt, and that actually encompasses all the hours that we've been talking about in the past 2 days. Thank you.
Remarks were made about whether, in a sense, I think the argument, another way to put it, is being too timid about this idea of making it palatable, which I know is my word, but it summed up, I thought, some of the thoughts.
I think I heard.
Yeah.
See, we also have to be very pragmatic. We have to be pragmatic and at the same time make our voices heard eloquently. And I agree 100%. But see, if you've been around for a long time and you see the same thing being done over and over and over again, you have to find new ways of getting to the main mission of what we want to do. Whether we like it or not, the developed world knows very well that they are contributing significantly to polluting the environment to the point of affecting climate change. Everybody knows that. I mean, you have an educated public. They are very much aware of it as well. We have some problems with respect to communication of this message to our own people on the ground. The type of persons who could speak eloquently in a language that is lucid enough for the ordinary person, ordinary intelligent person to understand, we haven't done enough of that. So that's our problem. And I think we should take the leadership role to do that and not to ask somebody else to do it for us. Having said that, we also know that people who have money, and forget about whether they are in the developed world or in the developing countries, they don't part with their monies very easily unless they are convinced there is something in for them. And so we rather have to help make a clear and convincing case. And I agree with the lady from India who said, we should make our voices heard eloquently at the proper corridors. Having said that, right now as we speak, there are quite a lot of people involved in this enterprise who feel that if we were to collect enough money right now, whom are we going to give to handle it, to disperse it, and so on and so forth? There is a school of thought that feel that the current financial institutions should handle it, like say the World Bank, because they've got a mechanism to handle money. There are others who feel that we don't trust these people, we want the NGOs to handle the money. Now, this calls for some serious soul searching, because there are quite a lot of people who will feel, say, comfortable to give their monies to the World Bank Group or other major financial institutions to handle these funds. But if you tell them that they should go and give it to some NGO group to manage it, they will feel exceedingly reluctant to do that. We have a problem, and the problem is when you give monies to, say, the NGOs, people ask questions, and I'm telling you all this based on the job I've been doing over the years and the type of queries that come from the developed world as well as a number of developing countries with respect to the accountability of, say, NGOs, some of the NGOs. If you give a lot of money to them, part of it is spirited away. And I can give you, you go to Kenya right now, do you know how many NGOs you have there? All of them asking for monies to manage what we are talking about, which for me is very serious business. And they feel they could do it faster. On the other hand, the international financial institutions like the World Bank Group, their project cycles are so long that when you have a disaster right now, and you say that this is the money that the big guys have put together, you should have it in use right now, then the problem starts. It's going to take us about 2 to 3 months for the staff to do a lot of work. In the meantime, people are suffering and dying. And then finally we have to go to the board. And it takes forever before disbursement takes place. And so we have to think seriously about what type of mechanism we're going to use to ensure that funds that are even made available right now is going to get to the right places expeditiously with accountability and whatever other assurances you need.
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Salim on that point.
Yes, I think I want to respond to the question of reframing and suggest something that is already happening and something we might want to build on. I mentioned that in the under the Framework Convention and the Kyoto Protocol, we have this new fund called the Adaptation Fund, not based on donor giving from countries, but on a 2% levy on CDM. One of the other innovations that the Framework Convention came up with is in the governance of this. This is the first international fund that's not controlled by donors, because there are no donors. The governance of it is a representation from around the world, the different regions of the world, the Annex 1 countries, so-called Annex 1 rich countries, non-Annex 1 countries, and special seats for the most vulnerable groups, the least developed countries and the small island states. So the governing body of this fund is actually a majority of developing countries. And the governing board, as it were, has met a number of times since it was set up in Bali, and is coming up with procedures on the very question of oversight and transparency, not from a perspective of donors accounting for what others have done with their money, but from the perspective of this is a global fund for a global good, which everybody has to agree on the procedures for transparency and accessibility and good utilization of the funds.